Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, wishing him well on Pakistan's National Day. The Prime Minister made it very clear. India wants cordial relations with Pakistan in an environment that's free of terror and violence. One thing appears to be very clear, and this is what sources in the government are saying, that while Pakistan's Prime Minister and Army Chief have been saying that they want peace with India, and the Pakistan Army Chief used words to the effect that let's bury the past. He did raise the Kashmir bogey even then. Let's be very clear about it. India is very clear for peace, for prosperity and for dialogue to move forward. The ball is in Pakistan's court to create the right environment in a terror-free scenario.
India desires cordial relations with the people of Pakistan. For this, an environment of trust, devoid of terror and hostility, is imperative. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's letter to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan on the occasion of Pakistan Day is creating ripples on both sides of the border.
अब ये फलाही रियासत बनने वाली है, जैसे प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब ने आज कहा, और मोदी साहब का जो खत पाकिस्तान को मिल गया, तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि पाकिस्तान और इंडिया के दरमियान अब नए ताल्लुकात का आगाज होने लगा है। फिर उन्होंने ये कहा कि कोविड में हम पाकिस्तान की कोई भी मदद कर सकते हो तो हम।
Pakistani media welcomed the development, seeing it as a thaw in the relations and the beginning of a new dawn.
आज एक अच्छी खबर यह भी है कि नरेंद्र मोदी साहब ने पाकिस्तान को यौम पाकिस्तान पे वज़ीर साहब को मुबारकबाद पेश की है। साथ उन्होंने ये कहा है कि हम अच्छे हमसाये की तरह रहना चाहते हैं। फिर उन्होंने ये कहा कि कोविड में हम पाकिस्तान की कोई भी मदद कर सकते हो तो हम तैयार हैं। तो मेरा ख्याल है ये आइस जो है उस साइड से भी पिघलनी शुरू होगी। तो ये वाकई इस लिहाज से तो हम कह सकते हैं कि एक नया पाकिस्तान डेवलप हो रहा है, तब्दीली आ गई।
Though some argued a letter from Prime Minister Modi should not take away from the fact that Prime Minister Modi had bombed Balakot and had missiles aimed at Pakistan.
हफ्ते हो गए हैं चौधरी साहब की नरेंद्र मोदी एक ट्वीट करके हमें मुबारक दे तो उस पे हम बगले बजाएं। जो तो वही नरेंद्र मोदी याद है कि जिस नरेंद्र मोदी ने पाकिस्तान की दुश्मनी में जहाज को बम बांध कर आपकी सरहदों को पामाल करके यहाँ भेजा।
Pakistan's commentators did comment that Imran Khan used to lament that Prime Minister Modi did not even respond to his phone calls and called him names, but was now elated to get a letter from Prime Minister Modi. In Jammu and Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti welcomed the letter. Security analysts were, however, cautious about talks of thaw in India-Pakistan ties. Government sources insisted the letter was routine courtesy, but insisted India was open to dialogue with Pakistan in a terror-free environment. Last week, the Director Generals of Military Operations decided to restore ceasefire at the LOC and return to the 2003 ceasefire.
Prime Minister Modi said he desires good cordial relations with Pakistan but in an environment of trust, devoid of terror and hostility.
Pakistan's Army Chief last week at the Islamabad Security Dialogue talked about burying the past and not interfering in internal affairs of neighbours.
Stable Indo-Pakistan relation is a key to unlock the untapped potential of South and Central Asia. The potential, however, has forever remained hostage to the disputes and issues between two nuclear neighbours. Kashmir dispute is obviously at the heart of this problem. However, we feel it is time to bury the past and move forward. But for resumption of peaceful process or meaningful dialogue, our neighbour will have to create conducive environment, particularly in Indian-occupied Kashmir.
However, India has on more than one occasion said that dialogue is not possible amidst the gunfire, and Pakistan needs to take action against India-centric terror for resumption of dialogue.
In his letter to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made it very clear. India wants cordial relations with Pakistan, but it has to be in a terror and violence-free environment. It's amply clear India is a victim of Pakistan's state-sponsored terror. So the ball is now in Pakistan's court to create that environment free of violence and terror. With cameraman Kripal Singh in Delhi, Gaurav Sawant for India Today. It's not just India that's a victim of Pakistan's state-sponsored terror. I interviewed Afghanistan's Foreign Minister, Mohammad Hanif Atmar, and he was very clear that while Afghanistan is moving forward on the peace process, Pakistan continues to train terrorists. It continues to train the Taliban. He gave specific details. I put a question to him about training that was on in Quetta and Karachi and medical attention that was given to armed fighters or armed terrorists. He said not just medical attention, but even training, and that Afghanistan had taken up this matter with Pakistan. But one thing even he made very clear, that Taliban will not be permitted to take Afghanistan back to those dark days, because Afghanistan wants democracy, wants to flourish, and even when there is a drawdown and the Americans pull out, the brave people of Afghanistan, Afghanistan's army, the civil society, they will continue to fight for peace and prosperity. With me is Mohammad Hanif Atmar, the Foreign Minister of Afghanistan. Sir, welcome on India Today. You've had a series of discussions with the External Affairs Minister and with the National Security Advisor. What's emerged from these discussions on the road ahead in Afghanistan?
As always, India has been a very kind, generous and a respectable friend of Afghanistan. And this time I'm extremely pleased to see that there's such a positive response. It's important for us and the region that India plays that role of consensus building and supporting a consensus for a just and lasting peace.
On ground, there are reports that last year there were more than 3,000 casualties in Afghanistan. Members of the civil society are specifically being targeted. More than 20 journalists, including women journalists, have been killed in Afghanistan in targeted killings. Is this the handiwork of Taliban? And in your appreciation, can the Taliban do this without outside support or support of our neighbor Pakistan?
Well, the Taliban have been, unfortunately, benefiting from sanctuaries outside Afghanistan. They have also been living in a symbiotic relationship with foreign terrorists as well as the criminal economy, including the drugs. So now the question that the Afghan people have put to the Taliban, that they have been arguing that they're fighting because of the foreign troops' presence in Afghanistan. Now there is an agreement, a peace agreement, that the foreign troops will be leaving the country, but as part of that agreement, the Taliban has an obligation to also cut ties with international terrorists and expel them from Afghanistan.
There are reports that after the Taliban negotiators visited Quetta and Karachi, and some reports seem to indicate that they visited military facilities, Pakistan military facilities, and met injured soldiers. One, is that also your information? And has their attitude hardened after that when it comes to negotiations?
It was very unfortunate that they were allowed to visit not only hospitals but also training centers. We've raised those concerns, and the Taliban have actually lost the trust of the international community. That initially people were euphoric when they signed the peace agreement, that the Taliban are committed to the peace process.
Isn't the source of terror, like in India, for Afghanistan, isn't it in Pakistan? And all this effort, is there an apprehension, Minister, it 20 years of gains could be lost in case the source, terror is not addressed at source.
This is the responsibility of every country in the region. Again, to look at the complication of the terrorist ecosystem and the infrastructure that they have created. So every nation will have to demonstrate that it is responsible in tackling this problem.
If I may be specific, has Pakistan displayed exactly what you seek? Ability, desire and action on ground to go after those safe sanctuaries for terrorists?
We have, as I said in my earlier interviews, seen some positive signs for peace making. We appreciated these positive signs. Pakistan has been helping in bringing the Taliban to the table. But our hope is for two things. One, that the Taliban commitment to the peace process is genuine, and Pakistan will help with that process. And second, that the Taliban would not be allowed to launch a spring offensive.
When it comes to women's rights or civil society growing and becoming powerful in Afghanistan, that could be lost, God forbid, if Taliban carries out that spring offensive. And can that spring offensive be carried out without active state support in the neighborhood in Pakistan?
Taliban must be now convinced that with all of their spring offensives over the past couple of years, they have not been able to threaten the gains of Afghan people. The only thing they've achieved is the loss of the hearts and minds of the Afghan people because of the bloodshed and the violence. So they must know now that violence is not producing a political gain for them. It is only increasing the miseries of the Afghan people.
Post the US withdrawal in May, will they be able to fight on their own? Do they require military hardware? Do they require committed financial support? For what and for what period to be able to fight the Taliban? Because the Taliban has state backing. What does the Afghan National Army require, sir?
It is true that the Afghan National Security Forces will continue to need fiscal sustainment as well as support in terms of training in equipment. There's no doubt about the fact that for exactly that reason the government of Afghanistan has agreements with the United States and NATO and our other international partners as part of the Resolute Support Mission. And already our partners of the Resolute Support Mission have assured the Afghan government that this support will continue for another 4 years.
Is there a figure that you could put in terms of how many $1 billion would be required? What kind of, so there are times when when air support or ISR support is required, even when the Afghanistan National Army carries out an offensive. So will that air support and all of that remain, sir?
First of all, on the financial support, yes, we've received assurances from our international partners that this will continue. Again, our international partners acknowledge the fact that the Afghans are fighting not just for themselves, not just for Afghanistan, but on behalf of the international community, because terrorism is a threat to every nation in the region and globally. Second, the critical security support, such as intelligence and close air support, we are looking at ways in which this can be provided by our own institutions, security institutions, and we are working with our international partners. It is true that Afghanistan's Air Force is growing. It may not have the same capability as provided by our international partners. It would be a plus if they sustain that commitment. But if they don't sustain it, and for a variety of reasons, we continue to undertake that responsibility, we will.
Because that's a very important point you raised there about terror safe havens of terrorists from various places could come and assemble in Afghanistan, and that would be a nightmare for the world.
It's been exactly for that reason that the international intervention and the support of initially, but the continued support for the Afghan National Security Forces over the past 2 decades, that it is an acknowledgement of the fact that Afghanistan should not become a safe haven for international terrorism. The Afghans are fighting and they're investing in blood, and the international community has a responsibility to support them with the resources necessary to carry out this effort.
So you saw how Afghanistan is exposing Pakistan state-sponsored terror. We'll also show you how Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said that terror in India comes only from Pakistan. But let me bring in Mona Alam, a journalist who joins us from Pakistan. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra knows Pakistan like the back of his hand, was our Consul General at Karachi, and Sushant Sareen is Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Mona Alam, you heard the Afghan Foreign Minister. He's saying Taliban terrorists not only getting treatment in Quetta and in Karachi, and from what sources say, at Pakistan military facilities, but they're also being trained by the Pakistan army. Just how serious is Pakistan about combating terror in the region when it's training, arming, launching terrorists, Mona?
Look, I don't think you can brush all Talibans with the same brush or paint all Talibans with the same brush, because Talibans, at first, we need to at least come in terms with the fact that they are genuine stakeholders in Afghanistan. They have a genuine say, and at least I think 70% of Afghanistan is not in the control of the Afghan government itself, as per SIGA reports. So if they're telling us that all Afghans are terrorists, I mean, there's a civil war ongoing there, for God's sake. He should put his house in order first.
You know, when I specifically put that question, whether there's a civil war going on in Afghanistan, I was told it is Pakistan-sponsored war that is on. There is no civil war in Afghanistan. There are Afghan elements, yes. There are Afghan elements, yes, but sponsored by Pakistan army. Complete that point before I bring in Ambassador Dogra and Sushant Sareen.
I heard him say that he knows of certain sanctuaries here in Pakistan. If that is the case, I mean, there is the closest cooperation ongoing as of now. And I can say that with full assurance between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So if that is the case, he can pinpoint those sanctuaries whatsoever is the case, because we have similar and more, I think, serious concerns regarding the TTP. They're launching attacks here every now and then. Certain attacks are foiled, fortunately, but unfortunately, certain are not foiled. So, I mean, our citizens are just suffering because of the Afghans which have been hosted by Pakistan as, I think, as good as Pakistani nationals themselves. So, I don't think that's the case. And if you think Pakistan is not serious in brokering peace, I mean, come on, the entire Afghan peace process that's ongoing, it's India who's absent there, not Pakistan. Pakistan
is
the most
India is not absent. Okay. You know, which is the irony, Sushant Sareen? Pakistan, the biggest state sponsor of terror, is being the honest broker, and honest broker to be used in the context where honest brokers are used. Pakistan is the sponsor of terror and Pakistan is sitting on the high table, but so is the Haqqani network. So terrorists are sitting on the high table deciding the future of Afghanistan, where poor Afghan people are being massacred.
Tragedy of Afghanistan, Gaurav, isn't it? And you know, the tragedy is also that, you know, people like Mona, who takes a very hawkish line whenever she comes on Indian television, but otherwise is a very reasonable person. You know, when she compares what is happening, say TTP operating from inside Afghanistan, from areas which are ungoverned areas, and everybody knows what the situation in Afghanistan is. And when she compares that to what is happening inside Pakistan, where there are Taliban sanctuaries, in a country like Pakistan, which claims that it is in charge of every single square inch of its territory, that nothing can happen in its territory without its approval. So how can you compare the two situations? And then I think I also blame it on the international community, which has given a very long rope to Pakistan, you know, on their shenanigans as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Yeah, does anybody mean to tell me that the Americans didn't know, you know, about the training camps where Mullah Baradar, when he last visited Pakistan, went and visited his so-called troops? He went out there, he went to the hospitals where the Taliban fellows come for rest and recuperation and for treatment. So all of this has been going on for the last 20 years. But for some strange reason, the Americans have simply shut their eye to what has been happening. And I'm sure there is no
Why is this the case? Why is this the case, Ambassador Dogra? You know, I'll come to you in a moment, Sushant, for what you think is very sinister, because it defies logic. Thousands of American soldiers have been killed at the hands of Pakistan-backed terrorists in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the graveyard of superpowers. Everyone knows the source of the terror is Pakistan. American generals have said so, and yet no action against Pakistan. Why is that the case, Ambassador Dogra?
Well, I'll give you two reasons for it. One, a personal experience. The day after 9/11, I was in Central Asia, meeting with the leadership there. It was a trip planned for bilateral visit, but as it happened, after 9/11, the talk turned to Afghanistan and what will happen there. Every president, every prime minister I had met was confident that Americans will bomb the hell out of Afghanistan. But they were also equally sanguine that Americans will be cutting and trimming the branches of terror in Afghanistan. The roots lie in Pakistan, and Americans will not attack Pakistan. So they were quite clear 20 years back. President Bush, it is reported, considered taking on Pakistan, but then his defense advisors told him that, look, we can go in there, but how do we get out of the nuclear Pakistan with all its aircrafts, tanks, and so on? So every time they discussed that possibility, they gave it up. The fact is that even Americans were afraid of taking on Pakistan. Otherwise, terror and the defeat, virtual defeat of America and its allies in Afghanistan may not have happened. So the fault, if one were to assign fault,
everyone knows the source of terror is in Pakistan. The source of terror is Pakistan. Mona, you are aware of Mullah Baradar's visit to Balochistan. You are aware, the whole world is aware about how Mullah Baradar went and met injured Taliban terrorists while in Balochistan, and yet no action is taken against him, unless you're saying that's liberated land and, you know, Jal Qamar Javed Bajwa's writ does not run in that area at all.
Look, I mean, nobody has said that Afghan Taliban are all saying it's a civil war. I've said this earlier. That means they're being equally bombed by the American troops, and they're also bombing them in return. I don't want to go into this debate as to who comes first and who bombs first, but I think it's a problem existing. And as far as I've seen the trends here, Donald Trump had fastened this entire process, but ever since the Biden administration has come in, I think it has slowed down very substantially and evidently. Having said that, look, I'm not denying Mullah Baradar, because we have been approached by the global community to broker peace, right? So we have to be in talks with the Afghan Taliban. That doesn't mean that we're sponsoring terrorism there. We rather want this to stop. We want to play a key role in putting an end to this civil war, because whatever tensions exist in Afghanistan, they have a direct impact here in Pakistan. They're directly proportional to terrorism here in Pakistan, and this is exactly what we've seen. I mean, this is why I was equating the TTP situation here to the Afghan Taliban situation over there, because ever since the situation has worsened
let's look at it. Let's look at it factually, Mona.
We're also, yes, facing similar attacks by the TTP. This is what I was saying. This is what I meant.
So so Americans may have been scared to bomb Pakistan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi ordered the bombing of Balakot after the Pulwama terror attack and blew the Pakistan nuclear bogey to bits. That's a fact now. And this has been done for the second time. The Kargil war, limited conflict, but under the nuclear umbrella. So you had a conflict in Kargil sector. It didn't escalate even to any other sector, coming to the nuclear threshold.
Why are you trying to provoke? I mean, are you trying to provoke a war between the two? I mean, what do you mean by this nuclear bogey all the time? Do you want to put it to test? I don't think your nation and my nation can afford this.
It has been put to test, and it's a bogey. India sent 16 aircraft into Pakistan, bombed Pakistan and returned, and Pakistan could do nothing.
Who else was Abhinandan? Your Prime Minister just wrote a letter to our Prime Minister on our Pakistan resolution
and
day,
said create the right environment for talks.
It makes no sense.
Okay,
You're trying to actually
I don't want to get into a tutu meme.
I don't know what you mean by this. But no, why are you calling
I am just stating facts. I'm a journalist, I state facts. Don't get provoked. Don't get provoked. I'm a journalist, I state facts, counter them with facts.
I'm not provoked, but I don't want to be,
I'm provoking no one.
I don't want anyone to be like,
I'm provoking no one.
You've got a nuclear weapon, show me how it works. That, I mean, it's not going to affect just
I am stating facts. Okay, Sushant Sareen, Mona's got provoked. As the millennials would say, Mona got triggered, but that's not what our aim was.
But Gaurav,
we bombed Pakistan and Pakistan could do nothing. So, Sushant.
So here is the thing. Mona is getting triggered unnecessarily. Nobody is saying that Pakistan will use the nuclear bomb. That is precisely the point you are trying to make. That Pakistan might have a nuclear weapon, but if the Americans were to take some very strong action, for example, the Americans were constantly going and bombing some of the Taliban bases in the FATA region for almost 5-6 years. Yes. They were doing it virtually on a daily basis. What did the Pakistanis do? The Pakistanis didn't go and drop a nuclear bomb on the Americans. Had the Americans pushed further, they could have, and I'm afraid for once I don't agree with Ambassador Dogra that the Americans are scared of the Pakistanis. I don't think it is a matter of fear. I think it is something a little more sinister than mere, this concern that the Pakistanis will take out the nuclear bomb. Pakistanis are many things. They're not suicidal. And they know what it means. So, when
the terrorists are, the generals are not.
When the Americans threatened to bomb them after 9/11 into the Stone Age, what did the Pakistanis do? They made a quick U-turn immediately overnight, and they dumped the Taliban at that point of time. At least they showed that they were dumping the Taliban. Okay, the Americans never pressed them hard enough. If the Americans want, they still have the leverages to actually turn the screws on the Pakistanis like nobody else can. Whether it's on the financial side, whether it's on the economic side, whether it's on the trade side. I'm not even talking about going and bombing the hell out of Pakistan. They don't need to do that. So the Pakistanis are very sensible, very pragmatic people, and they understand where, power lies. Now, the Americans don't want to
basically, Pakistan army is an army of businessmen. So they understand, when their economy is in a shambles, they would understand, Ambassador Dogra. You look at Pakistan's financial condition. Public debt, 87% of GDP in 2019-20. External debt at $113.8 billion. Total debt at 36.5 billion rupees. 11.5 trillion borrowed just in the past 2 years. So Pakistan is in deep trouble financially, and a country that's in such deep trouble does not use the nuclear button, sir. Can the Americans still put pressure on Pakistan and ensure that Taliban does not, by proxy, by hook or by crook, rule the roost in Afghanistan and gains of 20 years be lost here?
Just one correction. I hate contradicting Sushant because he's very knowledgeable on Pakistan and affairs relating to Pakistan. But Americans bombed FATA region with the approval of the Pakistan army. So that is a correction. They didn't. Yes. They stopped bombing as soon as Pakistan army had decided that the terrorists it wanted cleaned out had been cleaned out. So and And even that Abbottabad taking out of Osama bin Laden, the jury is still out whether General Kayani had given informal approval and concurrence to it. So that is one part. As far as the Pakistani financial condition is concerned, I think that story has been looping over and over again for the last 40 years, that Pakistan is on the verge of bankruptcy. It has survived and it will survive. The question that we are discussing now is what happens in Afghanistan and whether Pakistan has a role in it. If Pakistan did not have a role in it, then the new defense secretary of USA would not have rung up General Bajwa immediately after meeting the president of Afghanistan. So Pakistan has, according to reports, I am not imagining all this, according to reports, Pakistan has implanted ISI and Pakistan Army regulars in every major attack that takes place in Afghanistan. As Mona Alam very rightly said, 50% perhaps more of Afghan territory is now controlled directly or indirectly by Taliban. The fact is that Taliban are very confident of upping the terror attacks whenever they want and reducing them whenever the Pakistan army wants. So the fact is that directly or indirectly, Pakistan are controlling
which brings
what
me to that
happens in
point.
Afghanistan.
Exactly. That's the point I was coming to. Balakot, Mona, Pakistan realized you don't have strategic depth. If and when India decides to bomb Pakistan, India will do so. So is Pakistan once again trying to get that strategic depth in Afghanistan through the Taliban?
I don't think that's the case. I mean, we want peace to be established there in Afghanistan, and first and foremost, the Afghan government should, establish it in their own land. And this is exactly what we want to help them with. I don't want to comment on Balakot because I think it's a very continuous debate that we've gone into, because I think even the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force was not able to justify the claims they made in Balakot. The press talk was cancelled, it was taken off, and I never heard Abhinandan, Commander Abhinandan
ask
being
any general, ask any
So I don't
general,
want to go into those details.
the sanctity of Pakistan LOC and IB was violated without war being declared. 16 Indian aircraft were in your territory, your Air Force could do nothing, but that's a separate story. Sushant Sareen, is that what Pakistan is looking for through the Taliban? Strategic depth, and terror attacks in Afghanistan will only increase. The US wants to cut their losses and run away, or will better sense prevail? US would not want Afghanistan to be a graveyard of that superpower, especially after so many thousand American soldiers have sacrificed their lives, and they will still try and make amends some way or the other.
Gaurav, you've asked me two questions. Let me try and answer them very quickly. On the first question, the strategic depth doctrine, I think that was a completely stupid kind of a doctrine. It was something which Mirza Aslam Beg had come up with. It's neither here nor there. You don't expect that the Pakistanis searching for strategic depth will shift all their assets into Afghanistan so that they can confront India. I think that's something which a very stupid mind has conjured up, and I think the Pakistanis have rejected that. Strategic depth in a different sense, in the sense of security and other stuff, but not in the sense of that standing armies. On the second question, I think that's much more relevant, but I think there are more questions than answers. What will the Americans do different to change what is happening in Afghanistan if they plan to either stay on or whatever new thing they want to do? So until and unless they have some new plan in place, just reinforcing failure, I don't see what purpose is going to be served from it. And the Americans are not really ready to think new. And all that they're thinking is that we'll delay our departure. How does delaying your departure help in preventing the Taliban, the march of the Taliban, or the lands which the Taliban are occupying? And that is the question which nobody in the US wants to answer.
So will Americans do anything differently post the 1st of May? We'll watch that story. But look at the tragedy that's unfolding in Afghanistan. Mona Alam is absolutely right. The Taliban control major parts of Afghanistan, and that's if I may add, because of the support of the Pakistan Army and ISI. Because Afghan security officers are very clear, but for the material support, men, material, weapons, money given by Pakistan Army, Taliban wouldn't survive a month in Afghanistan. But what's the impact on ground? Sikhs have regularly been targeted by the Taliban, by Pakistan-backed terrorists in Afghanistan, and such a proud community, they are now thinking of shifting out of Afghanistan, lock, stock and barrel.
A gruesome assault. At least 25 were killed in a terror attack on a Gurdwara in Kabul in March 2020. Supported by the central government and civil society, the Punjabi community in India swung into action in the middle of a pandemic. Chartered flights brought back some 500 Sikhs and Hindus from conflict-ridden Afghanistan.
अफगान सोसाइटी इनको परिवारों को रिहेबिलिटेट करना, इनके बच्चों की एजुकेशन और इनको स्किलिंग एजुकेशन में जो वर्ल्ड स्किल सेंटर जेल रोड पे हमारा है, वहाँ पे इन यूथ को स्किलिंग दे के इनको नौकरियाँ भी लगवाई जाएंगी, तो पूरा रिहेबिलिटेशन प्रोग्राम है।
Chaibul Singh lost his friend and uncle in the Kabul attack a year ago. He came to India in September with his family. The 25-year-old Sikh Afghan is now trying to pick up the threads of his life in Delhi. But challenges remain momentous.
एक साल के लिए हमको मतलब हेल्प करना चाहिए संस्थावां ने, उसके बाद तो ना हमारे पास कारोबार है, ना कोई इंडियन प्रूफ है साड़ी को, मतलब ऑन में तो दस देवें कि एक गैस का डब्बा भी आधार कार्ड देना लिया जाएगा, मतलब वो भी साड़ी को नहीं है।
4 decades of persecution, starting with the Soviet invasion, through the rise of the Mujahideen movement to the Taliban, reduced the once 200,000 strong Sikh and Hindu Afghan community to a couple of hundreds by 2021. Hopes for stability shattered by attacks like the one that ripped through the Kabul Gurdwara last year. India has been the first destination for many Sikh and Hindu Afghans because of easy initial entry. An estimated 18,000 Sikh Afghans live in India, of whom some have citizenship and some are on long-term visas. India is not a signatory to the UN's Refugee Convention.
The 87 Hindu and Sikh families which crossed over to India from Afghanistan in the last 1 year are very thankful to the Indian government and its people, because they know that it was during a COVID year that they could cross over. However, their struggles have still not ended. From getting a train ticket to an LPG cylinder, school admission or a job, everything requires valid documents which they don't have. Their only request is that they be given either refugee status or some other solution be found so that they can also take care of their families.
But over the years, Europe and North America have also offered sanctuaries to the communities facing attacks in Afghanistan. The US-based Asha Marie Kaur is a researcher on Sikh Afghans. She says America's planned withdrawal from Afghanistan is based on wrong perceptions about insurgents, leaving the tiny minority extremely vulnerable.
At present, there are only 250 Afghan Sikhs left living in Afghanistan, and this number includes a handful of Hindus that live quite integrated with the community, though the Hindu community was displaced at an even faster rate than the Sikh community. There is an assumption by the US that is reflected in reports that the main threat to the Afghan Sikh and Hindu community, the Islamic State of Khorasan province, ISKP, is a decimated and weak group with not a lot of power. This has not been the case. They have been relentlessly attacking the remaining community.
The remnants of what was once a unique civilization in Afghanistan, an indigenous non-Punjabi Sikh Hindu community beyond India and Pakistan. With Amandeep Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today.
So it's very clear that Pakistan's state-sponsored terrorists, radical Islamist terrorists, are targeting minorities in Afghanistan. The fear is that they will next target the people of Afghanistan who don't follow the Taliban style of life. So democracy, all the gains made, will they be lost? We'll track that story very closely. But for the moment, Sushant Sareen and Ambassador Dogra and Mona Alam, many thanks for joining me.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.